How would you like to be remembered?
As a winner.
Ayrton Senna wins in Japan. Is Senna going to be cheated of victory in the Brazilian Grand Prix for the 8th time?
Formula One doesn't just end careers, it destroys them. While you're watching Max Verstappen dominate and Lewis Hamilton chase records, there's a graveyard of drivers whose stories ended not in champagne showers, but in twisted metal, scandal, and heartbreak that would make your worst nightmare look like a Sunday drive. Some died at their peak. Others had their souls crushed by politics. A few became so dangerous the FIA literally banned them from the sport. And one driver's career ended so spectacularly that it took down an entire team with him. These aren't just racing incidents. These are the disasters that remind us why Formula One is the most unforgiving sport on the planet. By the end of this video, you'll understand why every F1 driver is just one moment away from having their dreams turned into dust. Let's start with the one that changed everything. Ayrton Senna, 1994. The god who fell to earth. Senna wasn't just a driver, he was a force of nature wrapped in a yellow helmet. The Brazilian burst onto the F1 scene in 1984 with Toleman, immediately showing supernatural speed in the wet. His second-place finish at Monaco that year, in a car that had no business being on the podium, announced the arrival of something special. By 1988, he was untouchable. Driving for McLaren alongside Alain Prost, Senna won 8 of the first 9 races. His qualifying performances were so dominant, they seemed to bend the laws of physics, pole position after pole position, often by margins that left rivals scratching their heads. 3 world championships followed: 1988, 1990, and 1991. 41 race wins, 65 pole positions. At Monaco, he was practically unbeatable. 6 wins, including 5 in a row from 1989 to 1993. When it rained, other drivers prayed. Senna smiled. But 1994 was different. The new Williams FW16 was notoriously difficult to drive, especially after the ban on active suspension and traction control for 1994. Senna had already expressed concerns about the car's handling, the reduced downforce from new regulations making it unpredictable and dangerous. Then came May 1st, 1994, at Imola. The weekend was already cursed. Roland Ratzenberger had died in qualifying. Rubens Barrichello nearly joined him in a horrific crash during practice. The paddock was on edge, but Senna, he was leading the race, chasing what would have been his 4th title when his Williams hit the Tamburello corner at 190 miles per hour. The steering column snapped. The car went straight into the concrete wall. A piece of suspension pierced his helmet. The man who could make a car dance in the rain, who had redefined what was possible behind the wheel of an F1 car, was gone in an instant. Here's what they don't tell you. Senna knew something was wrong with that Williams. He'd complained about the handling all weekend. The car was a widowmaker, and he knew it. But he drove anyway, because that's what champions do. They race even when the machine wants to kill them. His death didn't just end a career, it ended an era. F1 would never be the same. Gilles Villeneuve, 1982. The fearless Canadian who flew too close to the sun. If Senna was poetry in motion, Gilles Villeneuve was pure, unfiltered aggression. The Canadian drove like every lap was his last, throwing his Ferrari sideways through corners that would make other drivers soil themselves. He never won a championship, but he won something more valuable: the hearts of every F1 fan who ever lived. Zolder, Belgium, 1982. Final qualifying session. Villeneuve was chasing pole position when he caught up to Jochen Mass's slower march. What happened next lasted 3 seconds but destroyed a legend forever. Mass moved left to let him by. Villeneuve went left at the same time. The Ferrari launched into the air at 140 miles per hour, spinning like a helicopter blade before slamming back to earth. Villeneuve was thrown from the cockpit, his neck snapped on impact. The man who once said, "I can't drive at 99%, it has to be 100% or nothing," gave everything he had, including his life. His son, Jacques, would later win the championship Gilles never could, but that's cold comfort for a career that ended in the most violent way possible. Ferrari never officially retired his number 27, but it became synonymous with him and holds immense emotional significance for the team and its fans. Some numbers are too sacred to use again. Felipe Massa, 2009. The spring that shattered a championship dream. Massa was 28 years old, driving for Ferrari and leading the 2009 Hungarian Grand Prix, when a 2-pound spring fell off Rubens Barrichello's brawn and hit him in the head at 160 miles per hour. The impact was so violent it cracked his skull and knocked him unconscious while still doing 120 miles per hour. His Ferrari careened into the tyre barriers, and for 8 terrifying minutes nobody knew if he was alive or dead. He survived, but the Massa who returned was different. The fearless Brazilian, who'd nearly won the 2008 championship, losing by 1 point in the most heartbreaking finish in F1 history, was gone. In his place was a driver who flinched at wheel-to-wheel combat, who second-guessed every move. Massa raced for 7 more years after the accident, but he never won another race. Not one. The spring didn't just crack his skull, it shattered his confidence, his killer instinct, everything that made him a championship contender. He retired in 2017, a shadow of the driver who once made Michael Schumacher look ordinary. Sometimes the disaster isn't dying, sometimes it's surviving and never being the same again. Robert Kubica, 2011, the Pole who had everything and lost it all. Kubica was supposed to be the next big thing. The Polish driver had already proven he could win. His 2008 Canadian Grand Prix victory was a masterclass in racecraft. Ferrari wanted him. McLaren wanted him. He was 26 years old with the world at his feet. Then he decided to go rallying. February 6th, 2011. Ronde Gomitololana rally in Italy. Kubica's Skoda hit a guardrail at 100 miles per hour. The impact was so severe it nearly severed his right arm. 7 hours of surgery, 17 operations. Doctors weren't sure he'd ever use his hand again, let alone drive an F1 car. The man who'd survived one of the most violent crashes in F1 history, his 2007 Canadian GP accident that registered 75 G of impact, was taken down by a rally stage in the Italian countryside. Kubica tried to come back. He tested with Renault in 2017, drove for Williams in 2019, but the magic was gone. His right arm was permanently damaged, his grip strength compromised. The driver who once wrestled 800 horsepower monsters around Monaco was reduced to a backmarker struggling to keep up. Sometimes disaster doesn't announce itself with sirens and medical helicopters. Sometimes it's just a quiet Sunday drive that destroys everything you've worked for. Nelson Piquet, Jr., 2009, the son who destroyed his own legacy. Nelson Piquet Jr. had everything handed to him, a famous father, a seat at Renault, and enough talent to win races. Instead, he chose to become the most hated man in Formula One history. Singapore 2008, lap 14. Piquet Jr. crashes his Renault into the wall at turn 17. It looks like a simple mistake, but it's actually the most calculated move in F1 history. The crash brings out the safety car at the perfect moment for his teammate Fernando Alonso to win the race. For a year, nobody suspected anything. Then, Piquet Jr. got fired from Renault, and suddenly he had a story to tell. He confessed to deliberately crashing on team orders from Flavio Briatore and Pat Simons. The scandal exploded like a nuclear bomb. Crashgate, they called it. Briatore was banned from F1 for life, later overturned by the court, and he eventually settled with the FIA out of court. Simons was banned for 5 years, which was eventually overturned due to procedural irregularities. Renault was given a 2-year suspended ban, and Piquet Jr., he became a pariah overnight. No team would touch him. His career was over at 24. The son of a 3-time world champion had thrown away his future for one race win that wasn't even his. He tried other racing series, but the stench of Singapore followed him everywhere. Nelson Piquet Jr. didn't just end his career. He proved that in Formula One, your reputation is everything, and once it's gone forever. Pastor Maldonado, 2015. The Crashtor who burned through everything. Pastor Maldonado won exactly one Formula One race, the 2012 Spanish Grand Prix for Williams. It should have been the start of something beautiful. Instead, it was the peak of a career defined by spectacular crashes, dangerous driving, and enough incident reports to fill a small library. Crashtor, they called him, and for good reason. Monaco 2011. Crashed into Lewis Hamilton.
And we've got Maldonado off from 6th place down in the first corner, so Hamilton's gone up the inside of him.
Monaco 2012 crashed into Sergio Perez.
Perez trying to go round the outside of Maldonado, then into Brooklands. Maldonado gets out of shape.
Valencia 2012 crashed into Lewis Hamilton again. The man had a talent for finding walls, barriers, and other drivers with supernatural precision. But here's the thing about Maldonado. He was genuinely fast. His pole position at Williams proved he had raw speed. The problem was everything else. racecraft, judgment, the ability to finish a race without destroying his car or someone else's. By 2015, even his massive PDVSA sponsorship money couldn't save him. Lotus dropped him and no other team wanted the liability. The Venezuelan oil money that had kept him in F1 for 5 years finally ran dry, and with it, his career. Maldonado's disaster wasn't a single moment. It was death by 1,000 crashes. He proved that in Formula One, talent without discipline is just expensive entertainment for everyone else. Yuji Ide, 2006. The man too dangerous for Formula One. Most F1 careers end with retirement ceremonies and farewell tours. Yuji Ide's career ended with the FIA literally taking away his license to drive. The Japanese driver lasted exactly 4 races in 2006 before the governing body decided he was too dangerous to continue. 4 races. That's not a career. That's an extended audition for a demolition derby. His Super Aguri was slow, but Ide made it deadly. He crashed in practice, crashed in qualifying, crashed in races. At Imola, he took out Christian Albers so violently that the FIA launched an immediate investigation. The verdict was swift and brutal. Yuji Ide's super license was revoked. He became the first and only driver in modern F1 history to have his license taken away for being too dangerous. Ide tried to appeal, tried to prove he deserved another chance, but the damage was done. The man who dreamed of racing alongside Schumacher and Alonso was banned from the sport after 87 racing laps. His career ended not with a crash, but with a letter from the FIA that essentially said, "You're too dangerous to be here." Jean-Éric Vergne, the talent that politics destroyed. Jean-Éric Vergne never crashed spectacularly, never caused a scandal, never endangered anyone's life. His disaster was quieter, but just as devastating. He was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time in the ruthless Red Bull system. At Toro Rosso, Vergne was a solid and consistent performer, often battling fiercely with his teammate Daniel Ricciardo. While Ricciardo ultimately showcased the standout qualifying pace that Red Bull coveted for their senior team, many in the paddock felt Vergne possessed the talent and racecraft to earn a shot at the top. When Red Bull needed to promote a driver to replace Mark Webber, the decision was between these two promising talents. Instead, they chose Ricciardo. The French driver spent 2014 knowing it was his last chance, effectively on borrowed time, with Red Bull having made their decision. He drove brilliantly, scoring more points than his new teammate Daniil Kvyat, and proved he belonged in Formula One. It didn't matter. Red Bull had made their choice, and with no other competitive seats available, Vergne's F1 career was abruptly over. Vergne's F1 career ended not because he wasn't good enough, but because he was in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong passport. He went on to dominate Formula E, winning 2 championships and proving what F1 had lost. Sometimes the disaster isn't what happens to you, it's what doesn't happen when it should. Nyck de Vries, 2023. The modern cautionary tale. He had the perfect resume. Formula E champion, podium finish at Le Mans, and a stunning F1 debut at Monza 2022, where he scored points for Williams on his first try. AlphaTauri signed him for 2023, and the future looked bright. 10 races later, he was gone. De Vries wasn't just slow, he was lost. The car that Yuki Tsunoda could wrestle into the points became an uncontrollable beast in his hands. Crashes, spins, and qualifying performances that made his teammate look like Ayrton Senna. The final straw came at Silverstone. Another crash, another weekend of being nowhere near Tsunoda's pace. Red Bull's patience, never abundant, finally ran out. De Vries became the shortest tenured driver in modern F1 history, lasting just 10 races before being replaced by Daniel Ricciardo. His career ended not with a bang, but with a whimper that echoed around the paddock. If you can't handle the pressure, F1 will eat you alive. The man who'd conquered every other racing series couldn't conquer Formula One's most basic requirement, being fast enough to justify your seat. These aren't just stories about bad luck or poor timing. They're reminders that Formula One is the most unforgiving arena in sports. You can be the most talented driver in the world, but one spring, one crash, one bad decision, or one political miscalculation can end everything you've worked for. Senna and Villeneuve paid the ultimate price for their speed. Massa and Kubica survived, but lost their edge. Piquet Jr. chose scandal over integrity. Maldonado crashed his way out of the sport. Ide was too dangerous to continue. Vergne was too good for politics, and De Vries wasn't good enough when it mattered. The common thread. Formula One doesn't care about your dreams, your talent, or your potential. It only cares about results, and if you can't deliver them consistently, safely, and without controversy, it will chew you up and spit you out without a second thought. That's the brutal beauty of this sport. It creates legends and destroys them with equal efficiency. Every driver on the current grid is just one moment away from joining this list, because in Formula One, disaster doesn't knock. It kicks down the door and takes everything you have. If these career-ending disasters shocked you as much as they shocked the F1 world, smash that like button, drop a comment about which story hit you the hardest. And subscribe, because F1's darkest stories are often the most important ones to remember.